The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne glasses. Investors whispered, cameras flashed, and the world's elite gathered to witness brilliance. Then Victoria Langford raised her glass, her voice sharp enough to cut through the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," she declared, her eyes locked on Madison Monroe, "before you rush the crown of the future, know this. She is Ethan Blackwell's hidden daughter, born of betrayal." Gasps echoed through the hall as Grace Monroe's hand tightened around her glass. The room froze. Silence fell heavy and suffocating as Madison turned slowly toward the accusation that would change everything forever. But how did it all begin? How did love, lies, and betrayal weave a story that would shatter reputations and rewrite destinies? Tonight, you'll discover the truth that was buried for 21 years. The romance, the manipulation, the heartbreak, and the shocking confrontation that stunned an empire. Stay with us through this unforgettable journey. And don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Your voice matters. Let us know, should betrayal ever be forgiven, or are some scars too deep to heal? New York City, 21 years ago. Grace Monroe balanced a tray of steaming coffee cups as she weaved between crowded tables in a small Manhattan cafe. 19 years old, with tired eyes and hopeful dreams, she worked double shifts to pay her college tuition. The air smelled of roasted beans and ambition. Tired businessmen typed on laptops. Students studied feverishly. Grace, though exhausted, carried herself with quiet dignity. Her heart longed for something beyond tips and textbooks. Yet she pressed forward, believing life had more in store. That afternoon, as she adjusted her apron, she had no idea fate would prepare and change everything forever. Ethan Blackwell pushed open the glass cafe door, the sharp chill of New York winter trailing behind him. At 22, heir to the Blackwell fortune, his world consisted of boardrooms, lectures, and expectations so heavy they suffocated. His tailored coat and polished shoes marked him as different from the crowd, yet his restless eyes betrayed a hunger for authenticity. Spotting Grace moving gracefully between tables, he paused, struck by her warmth amid the city's cold indifference. Something about her presence silenced the noise in his head. For once, Ethan didn't feel like the Blackwell heir. He felt like simply a man. Their first encounter was accidental. Ethan's arm brushed the tray Grace carried, sending a cup of coffee tilting dangerously. With reflexes sharpened by countless shifts, she caught it before it spilled, flashing a nervous smile. "Close call," she murmured, cheeks warming. Ethan chuckled, his laughter low and genuine, surprising even himself. He apologized, offering to pay for the nearly spilled drink. She waved him off, amused by his insistence. Their eyes lingered a moment longer than courtesy required, and in that pause, an unspoken spark ignited. Neither knew that this fleeting mishap would mark the beginning of their unforgettable story. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself returning to the cafe. At first, he told himself it was coincidence, then convenience, but deep down, he knew it was Grace. She had a rare ability to make the city feel less overwhelming. She spoke to him not as Ethan Blackwell the heir, but as Ethan the man. Grace, though cautious, began to welcome his visits. Between hurried orders and clinking cups, they exchanged smiles and fragments of conversation. Soon, late-night chats replaced polite small talk. Slowly, two worlds, one gilded with privilege, the other burdened by struggle, began weaving threads of intimacy. Their conversations deepened beyond surface pleasantries. Grace shared stories of her childhood in Brooklyn, of her widowed mother who cleaned houses to keep food on the table. She confessed her dream of becoming a writer, of using words to build bridges between people. Ethan listened intently, captivated by her resilience. In return, he revealed his struggles with a family legacy he never asked for, a destiny already written by his father's hand. Grace didn't pity him. She challenged him, reminding him he had choices. For the first time, Ethan felt truly seen, not as a Blackwell, but as a man. Love crept in quietly, then struck with force. Walks in Central Park replaced crowded cafe tables. Shared textbooks turned into whispered confessions beneath dim dormitory lights. Grace, with her laughter and stubborn courage, filled spaces in Ethan's life he hadn't realized were empty. To Grace, Ethan wasn't just wealth and privilege. He was gentle, curious, capable of kindness. Their worlds clashed, yet their hearts aligned. Every glance lingered. Every touch sparked something undeniable. By winter's end, their relationship was no longer a secret friendship. It had blossomed into a romance as intoxicating as it was forbidden. Neither wanted to let go. One evening, under the twinkling lights of the Brooklyn Bridge, Ethan whispered promises into Grace's ear. He swore that no matter his family's opinion, she was the woman he wanted. She laughed softly, unsure she could believe him, but her heart surrendered anyway. They kissed beneath the hum of traffic, sealing a vow that felt bigger than both of them. For Ethan, Grace was freedom from a gilded cage. For Grace, Ethan was proof she deserved more than struggle. Wrapped in each other's arms, they imagined a future where love was strong enough to silence the world's disapproval. Their intimacy deepened as the weeks passed. What began with hesitant kisses became nights of passion, their bodies and souls entwined. Grace, though shy, trusted Ethan completely, while Ethan found in her a refuge from suffocating expectations. Theirs was a secret world, fragile, beautiful, and dangerous. Grace often worried about what would happen if the Blackwells discovered her, but Ethan assured her love was enough. In those moments, they felt invincible. Yet beneath their happiness lurked a storm. Choices made in love carried consequences, and the night they gave themselves fully to one another would change their lives forever. Grace's suspicion came quietly at first. Missed periods, nausea, an unfamiliar heaviness in her body. Fear war with hope as she purchased a test, her hands trembling as she waited for the result. When the two faint lines appeared, tears blurred her vision. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering softly, "You're not alone anymore." At 19, her world shifted. It wasn't just her future now. It was theirs. Despite her fears, she felt joy blossom inside her chest. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would share the news with Ethan. Tomorrow, their lives would change forever. The next morning, Grace rehearsed her words in the cafe's back room. She imagined Ethan's reaction. Shock, perhaps, but followed by joy. She pictured his arms wrapping around her, his whispered assurances, his promise to stand by her. Hope colored her world brighter than ever. She didn't know that, at that very moment, forces far larger than their love were already moving against her. Ethan's parents had discovered everything. The Blackwells, with Victoria Langford at their side, were plotting to shatter her happiness before it could fully bloom. Grace stepped into the cafe, unaware that her tomorrow would never come. Richard Blackwell sat in his mahogany office, fury etched into his features as a private investigator laid photos across his desk. Each captured Ethan with Grace, laughing in cafes, walking hand in hand through Central Park. To Richard, these images weren't proof of love, but evidence of disgrace. Margaret stood beside him, her pearl necklace catching the light, her lips curled in disdain. "She's a waitress," she hissed. "Is this who you want beside our son at galas? A nobody from Brooklyn?" Richard's jaw tightened. In their world, love wasn't pure. It was a weakness to be eliminated. Margaret's voice sharpened with venom as she continued. "The Blackwell legacy demands perfection. Ethan cannot parade around with some girl who serves coffee. Imagine the tabloids. Our empire will be mocked." Richard exhaled, steady but seething. He nodded to the investigator, who bowed slightly before leaving. Once alone, Richard's decision hardened. "We'll fix this," he declared. For him, Grace wasn't just beneath their son. She was a threat to everything the family stood for. And the Blackwells didn't negotiate with threats. In their gilded cage, appearances were law. And Ethan's love for Grace was already marked for destruction. The Blackwell estate. Victoria Langford arrived at the Blackwell mansion in a sleek black limousine, her elegance undeniable. Daughter of influential socialites, she carried herself with polished grace, every movement deliberate. Margaret greeted her warmly, eyes gleaming as though seeing salvation. "This is the kind of woman Ethan should marry," Margaret whispered to Richard. Victoria offered a rehearsed smile, though ambition flickered behind her eyes. She had known Ethan casually for years, but now, standing in the Blackwell estate, she understood her role clearly. She wasn't here as a guest. She was a carefully chosen replacement for a girl deemed unworthy. Seated in the grand dining hall, Victoria listened as Margaret described Ethan's misguided infatuation with Grace Monroe. "He'll outgrow her," Margaret insisted, sipping wine. "But he needs guidance." Richard leaned forward, his tone steely. "We cannot simply remove Grace. We must disgrace her. Ethan must believe she betrayed him. Only then will he turn from her willingly." Victoria's eyes glimmered, aligning herself with the Blackwells' promised wealth and status beyond imagination. She agreed without hesitation, her voice smooth. "Tell me what needs to be done." That night, the plan to destroy Grace Monroe solidified in whispers and deceit. The scheme unfolded quickly. The Blackwells hired photographers to stage fabricated scenes, Grace appearing too close to another man, shadows suggesting betrayal. Messages were forged, carefully crafted to look like hers. Victoria, well-connected, ensured the gossip reached precisely the right ears, whispers that would eventually find their way back to Ethan. Margaret oversaw every detail, her precision chilling. Richard, proud, declared, "When Ethan sees this, he'll have no choice but to believe." Victoria smirked, imagining herself standing at Ethan's side. Together, they forged a lie so sharp it would cut deeper than any blade, aimed squarely at Grace's heart. A cold confrontation. Ethan's world cracked when Richard placed the fabricated photos before him. Grace, laughing with a man he didn't recognize. Messages suggesting late-night meetings. Words of supposed affection. "She's been deceiving you, son," Richard said gravely. Margaret added softly, "We only want to protect you." Ethan's chest tightened as he stared at the images. Doubt slithered into his heart like poison. He wanted to deny it, but the evidence looked damning. "No," he whispered, yet the seed had been planted. His parents watched silently, knowing the trap had sprung. For Ethan, trust in Grace began to crumble into suspicion. Margaret pressed the final dagger. She slid a glossy photo across the table. Grace smiling, her hand brushing against another man's arm. "This is who she really is," Margaret declared. Ethan's stomach churned. The Grace he knew, warm, loyal, honest, clashed violently with the Grace these photos portrayed. Richard leaned back, folding his arms. "Love blinds men, Ethan, but we see clearly. She's beneath you. She'll ruin you." Ethan's fists clenched, torn between memory and evidence. He left the room shaken, anger and heartbreak battling within him, unaware that the truth was nothing more than a carefully manufactured illusion. Later that evening, Victoria found Ethan sitting alone in the library, the fabricated photos scattered across the desk. She approached softly, her perfume lingering. "I'm sorry you had to see this," she murmured, her voice dripping with false compassion. Ethan, broken, whispered, "I loved her. I thought she was different." Victoria placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You deserve someone who fits your world, Ethan. Someone who will never humiliate you." Her words soothed the sting his parents had inflicted. In his vulnerable state, Ethan almost believed her. The perfect replacement stood before him, waiting patiently. The trap tightened. Richard joined them in the library, his tone commanding. "Grace Monroe cannot walk beside you to gala. She cannot stand before investors. She is not our kind. Choose wisely, Ethan. Protect your legacy." Ethan's heart pounded as the weight of expectation bore down on him. Grace's laughter, her dreams, their promises, all clashed against the cold images before him. He wanted to believe her innocence, but the doubt was louder. Margaret appeared in the doorway, finalizing the attack. "If you choose her, you lose us. Choose wisely." Torn and cornered, Ethan prepared for a confrontation. That night, Ethan decided. His love for Grace had been drowned in a tide of lies and fear. He told himself he was protecting his future, protecting his family name, though deep down, shame gnawed at him. Rage simmered in his chest as he replayed the supposed betrayal. Tomorrow, he resolved, he would face Grace and demand answers. But in his mind, her guilt was already sealed. The evidence, though false, had done its work. Ethan Blackwell believed he had been betrayed. What he didn't know was that Grace's truth was far greater than any lie could destroy. That same evening, Grace hummed softly as she arranged her small apartment. A notebook open on the table. Inside were scribbled lines of how she would tell Ethan her secret. "You're going to be a father." She rehearsed it aloud, her hands trembling with nervous excitement. She pictured his smile, his arms around her, the promise of a future together. Hope swelled inside her like sunlight breaking through clouds. For Grace, tomorrow wasn't another ordinary day. It was the beginning of their family. She packed her courage into her heart, unaware that Ethan was preparing a confrontation that would shatter her dreams. The next evening, Grace waited at the cafe, the place where their story began. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied back neatly, her eyes shining with anticipation. Each passing minute felt like eternity. She imagined Ethan's expression when she told him, imagined the joy, maybe even tears of happiness. She rehearsed her words again, whispering into the empty air, "Ethan, we're having a baby." Her heart raced with anticipation. The bell over the cafe door chimed, and Ethan stepped in, not with tenderness, but with fury burning in his eyes. Grace's heart sank at the sight. Ethan slammed the fabricated photos onto the table, his voice a hissed accusation. "Who is he, Grace? How long have you been lying to me?" Grace's smile faded into confusion as she stared at the images. "What is this? This isn't real," she cried, her voice shaking. Ethan's fist clenched as he leaned closer, eyes storming with betrayal. "Don't deny it. I trusted you, and you made a fool of me." Tears welled in Grace's eyes as she reached for his hand, desperate to calm him. But Ethan recoiled, his heart already poisoned by his family's cruel deception. Grace's voice cracked as she pleaded, "Ethan, please, you have to believe me. I would never betray you. You know me better than this." But Ethan shook his head, anger and heartbreak colliding. "I thought I knew you," he whispered bitterly. She reached for the notebook in her bag, ready to reveal her pregnancy, but his words cut through her like a blade. "We're finished, Grace. Whatever we had, it's gone." Her breath caught, her confession dying in her throat. She watched helplessly as a man she loved turned away, blinded by lies, leaving her shattered beyond repair. The cafe door slammed shut behind Ethan, the echo louder than thunder in Grace's chest. She collapsed into the chair, tears spilling freely, clutching her stomach. The word she longed to say, "You're going to be a father," remained trapped in her heart, drowned by betrayal. Outside, the city lights twinkled indifferently. Unaware of the storm raging inside her, Grace wept until her body ached, until hope itself seemed like a cruel joke. That night, she vowed silently to protect the life growing inside her. If Ethan chose lies over love, then she would raise her child alone, no matter the cost. Months later, Grace's apartment grew colder as the seasons changed, though not from the weather. Loneliness seeped into every corner, pressing against her with unbearable weight. She juggled 2 part-time jobs while studying at night, exhaustion carving dark circles beneath her eyes. With each passing day, her pregnancy advanced, her body aching under the strain. Yet within her grew a reason to persevere. She whispered to her unborn child, promising a world better than the one Ethan had left her in. Her love became a shield, and though she was alone, she refused to let despair define her future. The day Madison was born, Grace held her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. The cries of the newborn filled the hospital room, but to Grace, it was a symphony of hope. She kissed the tiny forehead, whispering, "You are my miracle." Her body ached, her spirit bruised, but she felt strength ignite within her. No betrayal could erase the beauty of this moment. From then on, sleepless nights and endless sacrifices became her reality. Grace promised Madison a life filled with love, even if the world around them dismissed her worth. Her daughter became her reason to live. Raising Madison was no easy task. Grace worked long hours at a bookstore during the day and cleaned offices at night. Her body pushed beyond its limits. Some nights, she studied at the kitchen table while Madison slept in a crib beside her. Bills piled up, meals were often simple, but Grace refused to let her daughter feel the weight of struggle. Every birthday was celebrated, every milestone cherished. Through exhaustion and sacrifice, Grace built a home not of luxury, but of love. She believed wealth could not measure happiness, but Madison would one day redefine success altogether. As Madison grew, her brilliance was undeniable. At 6, she read books far above her age. At 10, she built small gadgets from scraps, her imagination endless. Teachers praised her determination, marveling at her intellect. Grace, though weary, beamed with pride at every accomplishment. She nurtured Madison's gifts, reminding her daily, "Your worth isn't measured by others. It's built by you." Madison listened, carrying her mother's words into her heart. Though Grace bore scars of betrayal, Madison became her redemption. In her daughter's eyes, she saw not pain but possibility, a living testament that love could outshine even the darkest lies. By the time Madison reached her teenage years, ambition burned fiercely in her veins. While her peers obsessed over trends, Madison sketched business ideas in notebooks, watched documentaries on technology, and studied markets online. Grace sacrificed everything to support her, scraping together savings for summer programs and competitions. Madison thrived, winning accolades, scholarships, and respect. Each victory felt like vindication for Grace's sacrifices. The daughter of a waitress and a cowardly heir was no longer invisible. She was rising. Grace often whispered to herself at night, "Ethan may have abandoned us, but look what we built without him." 2 decades later, at 21, Madison Monroe had become a force the business world could no longer ignore. Her startup, born from late nights and relentless drive, developed innovative software helping small businesses manage finances. Investors marveled at her genius, hailing her as a prodigy. Unlike her peers, Madison wasn't distracted by fleeting luxuries. She envisioned empires. Grace, watching from the sidelines, felt pride swell in her chest. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice had borne fruit. Madison wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Though unaware of her true father, she carried within her the fire of resilience inherited from her mother's unwavering strength. Madison's face graced magazines and online platforms, her story of determination capturing hearts. Forbes 30 Under 30 named her among the most promising entrepreneurs, while television anchors marveled at her poise. She wasn't just building wealth, she was rewriting narratives. To her, failure wasn't a feat, but a stepping stone. Her speeches echoed Grace's teachings. Strength is born from struggle. The world applauded her brilliance. But for Madison, success wasn't about applause. It was about proving to her mother that her sacrifices were worth it. Together, they celebrated milestones quietly. 2 women against the world, unaware of the storm preparing to resurface. The invitation arrived in a gold-embossed envelope, the Blackwell crest gleaming at the top. Madison unfolded the letter, her eyes widening as she read aloud. "We are honored to invite you to present your company at the Grand Madison Ballroom Gala." Grace froze, her breath catching. That name, Blackwell, sent chills through her. Her mind raced back to betrayal, to fabricated lies and abandonment. "Mom," Madison asked gently. Grace forced a smile, hiding the tremor in her voice. "This is your moment, darling. Don't let anyone steal it." Yet inside, Grace knew destiny was dragging them back into old wounds. The weeks leading to the gala were a whirlwind of preparation. Madison rehearsed her presentation tirelessly, perfecting every slide, every phrase. Investors called daily, eager to secure a piece of her brilliance. Grace watched with quiet pride, yet unease lingered in her chest. She wanted Madison to shine, but she feared the shadows that still haunted her own past. Each night, she debated telling her daughter the truth about Ethan, but the words never came. For now, Madison's focus was on success, not scars. Grace prayed desperately that history would not repeat itself on that glittering night. The day of the gala arrived with crisp winter air biting at Madison's cheeks. Dressed in a sleek navy gown, she looked every bit the rising star investors adored. Grace, in a simple but elegant dress, walked beside her daughter, nerves hidden behind a composed smile. Cameras flashed as they entered the Grand Madison Ballroom, its crystal chandeliers casting a golden glow across marble floors. Journalists whispered Madison's name, their pens ready. Grace's heart raced. She wasn't just walking into a ballroom. She was walking into her past. For Madison, it was opportunity. For Grace, it was confrontation. The grand Madison Ballroom. Inside the ballroom, glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos filled the space. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter echoed, and the scent of wealth lingered in the air. Madison stood poised, her confidence drawing attention instantly. Across the room, Ethan Blackwell entered, commanding respect with every step. At 43, his presence still carried the weight of authority, though his eyes betrayed weariness. As his gaze swept the crowd, it landed on Madison. His breath caught, the curve of her smile, the spark in her eyes. It was Grace all over again. A storm of recognition and regret churned within him. Ethan's chest tightened, memories of Grace flooding his mind. He had buried the past beneath corporate victories and hollow engagements, but here it stood, living, breathing, radiant. Madison laughed softly with an investor, her tone confident, her posture proud. Ethan's jaw clenched. Could it be? The thought gnawed at him. He leaned toward his loyal assistant, Daniel Rhodes, and whispered urgently, "Check everything about her, now." Daniel, efficient and discreet, slipped away with his tablet. Ethan's gaze never left Madison. With every gesture, every expression, he saw fragments of the woman he once loved, and guilt clawed at his heart. Minutes passed like hours until Daniel returned, his face pale, eyes darting. He leaned close, his voice low but steady. "Sir, her name is Madison Monroe, 21 years old. Mother, Grace Monroe. Father not listed on any record. Her company is registered under Grace's Brooklyn address." Ethan froze, his world tilting violently. His breath grew shallow as the truth struck him. Madison wasn't just a prodigy. She was his daughter, his blood, his legacy, the child he had abandoned. He gripped the table for support, his heart thundering. Shame consumed him as the weight of 2 lost decades crushed his chest. As Madison took the stage, the ballroom dimmed, a spotlight illuminating her. She stood tall, commanding the room with effortless grace. Ethan's eyes blurred with tears he refused to shed. She was perfection. Everything he had hoped for, everything he had forfeited. Each word she spoke resonated with passion, echoing the fire Grace once carried. Investors leaned forward, captivated by her brilliance. Ethan sat frozen, torn between awe and despair. The daughter he never held, never guided, was conquering the world without him. He whispered hoarsely to himself, "She's mine, she was always mine." The guilt nearly suffocated him. Grace sat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Pride swelled as Madison's voice carried across the hall, but her chest ached with dread. She felt Ethan's gaze burning from across the room. After 21 years, their worlds had collided again. She refused to look at him, but memory stabbed at her heart. His accusations, his abandonment, her tears. Madison, unaware, spoke with conviction, her words inspiring thunderous applause. Cameras flashed, capturing her triumph. Ethan, hidden in shadow, wept silently. The truth stood on stage, radiant and untouchable, a reminder of love lost and betrayal that still poisoned his soul. Moments later, Madison's voice soared across the ballroom, steady and magnetic. She spoke not just of profits, but of purpose, weaving stories of small businesses transformed by her software. Her conviction lit the stage brighter than the spotlight itself. Investors hung on her every word, nodding in agreement, captivated by her clarity. Grace's eyes glistened with tears of pride as she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Ethan leaned forward, unable to look away, torn between wonder and regret. The audience erupted in applause when Madison finished, a standing ovation filling the hall. For that moment, she owned the entire room. The applause thundered on, Madison smiled radiant as she bowed slightly in gratitude. Cameras flashed, immortalizing her triumph, while reporters scribbled furiously. Ethan's chest swelled with conflicting emotions, joy for the daughter he had never known, sorrow for the years he could never reclaim. Grace dabbed her eyes, whispering softly, "That's my girl." Investors crowded near the stage, eager to speak with Madison, their excitement palpable. In that dazzling moment, it seemed nothing could dim her light. But just beyond the applause, shadows stirred. Envy and malice waited, preparing to strike and unravel perfection that Madison had built. Grace guided Madison down from the stage, her hand resting gently on her daughter's back. The reception was alive with chatter, investors buzzing with praise. Waiters circulated with champagne trays, and music swelled in the background. Ethan remained frozen, unable to approach, guilt chaining him in place. Victoria, however, stood poised near the champagne fountain, her eyes sharp with calculation. She had watched Ethan's every glance, every unspoken emotion, and she knew the truth he refused to admit. Tonight wasn't about celebration. It was about exposure. Her moment had come, and she would not let it slip through her hands. Victoria lifted her glass with practiced elegance, her smile sweet but her eyes cold. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called, her voice carrying across the marble hall, silencing chatter. The crowd turned curious. "Before you rush to embrace Madison Monroe as the future of business, allow me to remind you of her past." Gasps rippled through the room as she gestured toward the massive projector screen. Images flickered, fabricated photos of Grace with another man, her smile twisted into false narratives. This is a woman she descends from, a liar, a disgrace. The applause died instantly. Whispers spread like wildfire. Grace's blood turned to ice as the images glowed across the ballroom. Her hands trembled, her chest tightening with remembered pain. Madison's eyes widened, confusion clouding her face as murmurs filled the hall. She turned to her mother, whispering, "Mom, what is this?" Grace's throat closed, the past rushing back with crushing force. Victoria smirked, her voice dripping with venom. "This is the truth Ethan Blackwell saw 21 years ago. The truth that destroyed his future. This is the blood you celebrate." Silence blanketed the room. All eyes darting between Madison, Grace, and Ethan, waiting for the next revelation. Richard Blackwell stepped forward, smugness etched into every wrinkle of his face. Margaret followed, pearls glinting beneath the lights. "We showed Ethan the truth about Grace years ago," Richard announced proudly. "We protected him from a girl who would have ruined him. We saved his family's name." Margaret added, "She was never worthy of standing beside us. She was never one of us." Their arrogance poured into the hall, twisting the air thick with tension. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. Madison's fists clenched at her sides, her mind spinning as the enormity of betrayal began to take shape. The crowd buzzed in disbelief. Phones raised, cameras snapping every second of the scandal. Some whispered in defense of Madison, while others murmured in judgment. Grace stood paralyzed, her dignity pierced once again by the cruelty of the Blackwells. Ethan's heart pounded as shame consumed him. He saw Madison's eyes harden, her confusion giving way to fury. He could no longer stay silent. He stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Stop this." The room fell quiet instantly. All eyes shifted toward him. Ethan's confession hovered at the edge of his lips, the weight of 2 decades pressing heavily upon his chest. Ethan's voice cracked as he turned toward Grace. "It wasn't the truth, it was lies," he said hoarsely. "All of it was fabricated, and I—" His words faltered, his shame laid bare. He looked at Madison, his hands trembling. "I believed them. I was a coward. I didn't fight for your mother. I abandoned her. I abandoned you." Gasps echoed across the hall. The crowd froze, stunned by a confession. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every word, every tear threatening to spill from Ethan's eyes. For the first time, his empire wasn't built on power. It was collapsing under truth. Grace's body shook as tears spilled down her cheeks. For 21 years, she had carried the weight of betrayal in silence, but hearing Ethan confess broke open wounds she thought had scarred over. "You destroyed me," she whispered, her voice trembling but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Madison looked between them, her mind reeling. She had dreamt of her father countless times. Imagined a man who had fought for them, but reality stood before her. A man who chose lies over love. Disappointment carved itself into her heart, colder than anger, heavier than any burden she'd ever carried. The ballroom was suffocating with tension. Investors whispered, weighing scandal against brilliance. Madison straightened her shoulders, her youthful face hardened with resolve. She stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "You believe them," she said, eyes locked on Ethan. You let lies destroy her. And because of that, you destroyed me too. Gasps echoed once more. Grace reached for her daughter's hand, but Madison's gaze never wavered from Ethan's. Cameras clicked, recording the moment a daughter confronted the father she never knew. The empire's walls trembled, not from financial collapse, but from the truth finally set free before the world. Under the spotlight, Ethan's knees nearly buckled as he faced the daughter he'd abandoned. His voice cracked with desperation. Madison, I failed you before you were even born. I let my parents manipulate me. I let fear control me. I believed lies because I was too weak to fight. The weight of his cowardice pressed on him like chains. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I beg you to understand, I never stop regretting. His words trembled in the air, but Madison's face remained cold. For her, regret was no substitute for the years her mother suffered alone. Madison inhaled deeply, her voice slicing through the silence. Understand, she repeated, you chose them over her, over us. You believed lies instead of the woman you loved. That wasn't protection, it was betrayal. Her words rang like a gavel striking judgment. Grace's hand tightened around Madison's, pride and sorrow blending in her eyes. Ethan's lips quivered as he tried to speak again, but his daughter's stare silenced him. You lost the right to ask me for anything, Madison declared. You were a coward when she needed a protector. That's who you'll always be to me. Grace finally stepped forward, her voice steady though her tears flowed. For 21 years, I carried our daughter alone. I held her when she cried. I worked when my body wanted to give up. I believed in her when no one else would. And where were you, Ethan? You let me drown in silence. Ethan flinched as each word pierced deeper. Grace raised her chin defiantly. You thought I wasn't enough for your world, but I raised a woman who surpasses anything your world could imagine. Applause began rippling through the crowd, echoing Grace's triumph. Madison's gaze burned like fire as she delivered the final blow. I forgive you, she said softly, her tone laced with finality. But forgiveness doesn't mean acceptance. It doesn't mean you'll have a place in my life. You chose lies over love, and because of that, you'll never stand beside me. Not as a father, not as anything. Her words echoed across the ballroom, cutting through whispers and gasps. Ethan's chest caved, his shoulders slumping. For the first time, the mighty heir of Blackwell Industries looked small, swallowed by the weight of his own ruin. Investors erupted in applause, not for Ethan, not for Blackwell's, but for Madison. Phones flashed, cameras clicked, capturing history in the making. Grace pulled Madison close, her tears wetting her daughter's shoulder. Richard and Margaret stood stunned, their smug faces stripped of pride, their empire's image cracking before their eyes. Victoria's smirk faltered as murmurs condemned her role in the scandal. Ethan turned toward his parents, fury blazing, but the moment for redemption had passed. Madison stood tall, victorious. In that moment, she wasn't just Grace's daughter. She was proof that truth, once revealed, can destroy even the strongest dynasties. Outside the ballroom, the cold winter air greeted Grace and Madison as they stepped outside, cameras flashing furiously. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward, but Madison ignored them all. She tightened her grip on her mother's hand, guiding her past the chaos. The night sky sparkled with stars above Manhattan, a stark contrast to the storm they had left behind inside. Grace exhaled heavily, relief washing over her body. For the first time in decades, she felt unshackled. The world finally knew the truth. Together, mother and daughter walked into freedom, leaving betrayal, lies, and Blackwell arrogance behind them forever. Ethan staggered out moments later, his coat clutched tightly around him. Cameras swarmed, questions hurled like stones. His face, once admired, now looked hollow and broken. Reporters demanded answers. Why did you abandon Grace Monroe? Did you know Madison was your daughter? Ethan's silence spoke louder than words. He raised a hand to shield his face, but flashes captured his shame. For years, he had built walls of power and prestige, but now they crumbled publicly. Regret weighed heavier than any fortune he had inherited. In that moment, Ethan realized true poverty wasn't financial. It was losing the love he betrayed. Richard and Margaret remained inside the ballroom, cornered by angry investors demanding explanations. Their carefully constructed facade of superiority unraveled, their influence crumbling under scrutiny. Whispers spread like wildfire. Contracts threatened to dissolve. Alliances shaken. Margaret clutched her pearls desperately, her composure slipping. Richard's booming authority faltered as accusations flew. Their plan to protect their empire had backfired spectacularly, leaving them exposed as manipulators. Meanwhile, Victoria slipped quietly toward the exit, her ambitions shattered. She had tied herself to a sinking ship. The dynasty they had tried so hard to preserve had fallen, destroyed not by outsiders but by their lies. On the street, Grace and Madison paused beneath a glowing street lamp. Madison turned to her mother, her eyes softer now, though steel remained in her spine. "Everything I am, I owe to you," she whispered. Grace's tears spilled freely as she pulled Madison into her arms. "You are my greatest victory," she said. In that embrace, the years of sacrifice, pain, and silent endurance found their meaning. Grace no longer carried her burden alone. Her daughter had transformed it into strength. Together, they stood not as victims of betrayal, but as conquerors of it. Love had written the final word. As they walked into the night, cameras still flashing behind them, Madison whispered one last truth for the world to hear. Forgiveness frees the soul, but scars remain forever. Grace squeezed her hand, pride swelling. The city roared with life around them, but for Madison and Grace, it was quiet, peaceful, as though the world finally recognized their worth. Behind them, the Blackwell name lay in ruins, tarnished beyond repair. Ahead of them stretched a future not chained by betrayal, but forged by resilience. Their story was no longer one of abandonment. It was a legacy of strength and unbreakable love.